one is about the nature of sacrifice. Now, I've spoken about this topic for quite a while, but just touching on it whilst I'm talking about other topics, but it's topical for me at the moment in my life, and especially as I'm witnessing it in many different aspects of my life. I'm noticing that there are a lot of people that interpret it in different ways. Traditionally, when we think about sacrifice, you think of, iconic, symbolic people like Jesus, or, you think about martyrdom, or, you think about a mother, what she has to sacrifice for her child. Even just to be a mother, potentially her career. And for me, the common thing I get is pity from people, because, I work a lot, but the nature of what I do is something that I thoroughly enjoy and that I'm passionate and borderline obsessive about, in a positive sense. And so I willingly choose to give of myself to those projects. And does that mean I have to sacrifice other things? Of course it does. A lot of my social life, I sacrifice that. And, there's many, many aspects of life that I've willingly chosen to sacrifice in order to dedicate myself to certain things. And I find it gets met with pity, which is very interesting, because there's this assumption that if you're working all the time, it just engenders pity from people. And, the typical small talk comments like, oh, you're looking forward to the weekend, or, oh, I bet you're looking forward to a break, or it's going to be great once you have a break. And it's just not like that for me. And, it's a conscious choice to give of myself in this way rather than other things. But there's another side to sacrifice. And I kind of want to blend the topic of this podcast with the topic of change. I haven't yet decided whether I'm going to call this podcast The Nature of Sacrifice or The Nature of Change, possibly both, but I knew these two topics would merge. And this is the fundamental truth about, from my perspective, about the nature of change. And that things are not changeable. Everything that that makes up our reality, a series of atoms and molecules forming more complex molecules, a series of cells and organisms forming more complex organisms. The nature of these things is that the ecosystem that is made up of virtually trillions of cells that make up one organism, trillions that make up another kind. If you zoom into any organism close enough, you'll see that it's just a connection and a link between trillions of individual cells. But let's say you take an organism and it's it's a basic organism, and it has let's say it has fins, like it's a water creature. If that organism lives in a pond and that pond's drying up, and that organism evolves so that it can survive on land, then its fins would become obsolete. The creature is still the creature, but the truth is that all of the individual cells that make up that creature, they don't change. Yes, of course, there are new cells that are born, that are birthed within that organism so that it can grow legs. But the other cells that make up the rest of that creature, they don't change. They remain the exact cell that they were all along. And so we talk about change, we talk about transformation without factoring in the nature of everything, of all forms of organic life. And that we don't change. The cell does not change, and in fact it's programmed to resist change. And when the organism recognizes that it is defeated by its ecosystem, by the environment, then the aspects of that, the first thing that happens is the aspects of that organism that are rendered obsolete because of the environment, they die. They don't turn into something else. They're sacrificed. And in this case of the example of the organism in the pond that had fins and then grew legs so that it could walk on land. The fins don't change into legs. The fins are sacrificed. The organism is defeated in its current state, and it sacrifices what it was in order to become something more. It does not transform into a different version. It is something entirely new. But the cells that remain exactly the same, unchanged. So the organism is largely the same, except for it's growing new appendages. There are now new cells that are part of its environment, being its body. And this is really the mindset that you have to shift into in order to understand this, is to view your body as an ecosystem. Each individual cell within your body is programmed to thrive and to conquer its environment if it's threatened. It's not trying to help any of the other cells. It is just fulfilling the role of being a cell. It's only aware of itself, and its awareness is limited to the perspective of following its nature. Just by the cell being what it is enabling the greater ecosystem of our body to be a body. But every individual cell is sovereign, and it is only following its nature. It's not trying to help anyone. It's not trying to help anything. Your body is an ecosystem, and it's made up of trillions of different forms of life who are just following their nature, being what they are, a specific kind of cell. And if that cell feels threatened by its environment, then it acts accordingly. And its nature is to defy that threat, defend itself, even attack it. It is sovereign. Every cell is sovereign. And here's the issue. Most of us are trying to force our bodies to change. We want our body to change. We want them to be slimmer, stronger, more muscular, more toned, more flexible, tanned, beautiful. Meanwhile, the individual cells that make up the body couldn't care less about any of that stuff. They're just busy being what they are. And so all that they experience is an oppressive force in their environment that is trying to get them to change into something else. But these cells, they are what they are. They've evolved into what they are because of the perception of the environment that they live within. And this is why, I'm always talking in podcasts about, and just to people in general about, never ever tell someone they need to change. Never stop teaching people. A teacher is holding the perspective that they hold that is invalidating the perspective of the student. It's assuming that the perspective of the student isn't as educated as theirs, isn't as wise. It is assuming that whatever the student is doing now, they're doing it wrong. And they're not. They're not. They're not doing it wrong at all. Every aspect of every individual's evolution is perfect. They are exactly where they are on their evolutionary path because of everything that came before them. The millions of years that they've evolved, or however long it is. It's perfect. They are a perfect creature, exactly as they are. There's nothing they have to do. There's nothing they have to change. Everyone's trying to change. Change this, save the world, save this, save that. We don't have to do any of that. We just have to follow our own nature and allow our own nature to arise. The problem is that we don't do that. We're spending every last second of our lives focusing on how we can change, wishing that we could change. If I had a business, then I'd be happy. If I had all this money, then I'd be happy. If I lived in a different home, then I'd be happy. If I could do this, then I'd be happy. Everything is conditional to some form of change taking place. And we're forgetting to live right now. We're forgetting to live right now. We're forgetting to be what we are now. Because what we are now is perfect. And if you're one of these people that feels as though you're fulfilling some duty that because you have to save someone else, you are sacrificing yourself. You're sacrificing who you are now and your potential fulfillment now in order to try and feel good about helping someone else. Meanwhile, all your needs are going unmet. All the stuff that you really want for yourself right now that you could be giving to yourself, it doesn't even get listened to. You probably don't even know what you want. And so I'll explain or share with you my perspective on what actually happens. Because if you think about the word transformation, it's something changing its form. And that is possible. We can change form if you look at us as one thing. Like our friend who used to swim around in the pond, the form has now changed, and it is now something capable of walking on land. It's the same being, but the form is different. But change, the energy of change is entirely different. It's entirely different. But in truth, in order for there to be a change in form or a change of state, something must die. Something must be sacrificed in order for something new to then live. Whether it's the flippers to make way for the new legs, whether it's the physical structure of the caterpillar before it becomes the primordial substance, that something entirely new, the butterfly, just emerges from. It's just primordial ooze. Caterpillar sacrifices itself. But it's the same with human beings. And I've told a story about one of the projects I've been involved with for well over a decade now. I was sharing with someone today actually that I have a team of people that I work with, and I'm big on consensus, and not so much in terms of governance, but as a rule of thumb, is something really potent to do when you're working in a team, and that we collectively agree not to move forward with something if there's discord. So the commitment is to reconciliation of anything where there's discord. And this is why it's really helpful having people with polarized perspectives on a team who are completely opposite to each other, because the reconciliation of those perspectives renders profound revelations that enable choices to be made within the business that otherwise we wouldn't even be aware of. But there was one particular instance where my business partner, I could tell he thought I was making a mistake in the business with some direction we were going in. He shared with me that he thought it may not be the right move, but I was adamant. This is my vision. I can see it in my vision. It may not make logical sense right now, but this is the way we need to proceed. And instead of reconciling that discord, and this was quite early on, where we hadn't really embedded this way of being in the business. And so what happened was I just went for it. And it was the wrong thing to do. It was a decision to, spend money on something and to invest in something too soon. And, we didn't get utility from that investment. And, it cost us, some money that we could have utilized elsewhere in the business. And, what there are times where, you're not always going to reconcile everything. And you have to just let people be who they are and allow them to have that allow them to have that perspective, and actually give them the space to make the mistake. Because sometimes they need to have an experience in order to get them into the right place and space to be able to make the right decision for themselves. And this was one of those cases, the same thing happened, and the tables were turned where my business partner was adamant that we should be developing a specific product. And I felt really strongly that it wasn't the right thing. Tried to, share my perspective and say that, we should be looking at other things and focusing our attention on here. But he was very, very adamant. And, sometimes you just have to allow it to unfold so that we can have the experience of the failure to bring a perspective to everyone where there's consensus that, okay, we're going to allow this to die now in favor of the emerging truth. And so that becomes the reconciliation. And there's been multiple times where I've, because of my experience and my background and my understanding of certain things, I had a strong feeling about how we should begin structuring our pricing. The other two people on my team didn't agree, and so we reconciled as much as we could. But when you don't have the truth about what the ideal price is for people, then you're reconciling assumptions. And so you can't get to the truth when, especially when you're creating something new, like a new business. And so we had to wait for our beta test to unfold and work with businesses who were utilizing the product and giving us feedback. And it took quite a while for us to get there in the end. But when the truth emerged, it was exactly how I'd suggested it should be in the beginning. And we embrace this because what all three of us are committed to is allowing the emerging truth to determine what we let go of, what we sacrifice, whether it be a perspective. We assumed that this was the ideal way to go. The truth has emerged, and we're now willing to sacrifice everything that contradicts that truth so that we can evolve. So this is what I mean by sacrifice is, as a human being, as creators, we're always creating stuff, always. Our capacity to thrive is entirely dependent on our willingness to let go of what every emerging truth renders obsolete in the moment. A new truth has emerged. I was unaware of this even a few moments ago. The truth, this truth now means that what I believed before about this is now obsolete, and I just let it go. Another truth emerges. This is now obsolete. It is gone. You're always allowing the emerging truth to determine what you become in the next new moment. Always choosing to become more. Because of this truth, I can now become this. Because of this truth, my business can now become that. Because of this truth, my business can now become that. Meaning that my business used to have fins. In this moment, a truth emerges, and now I'm allowing my business to have legs, and it no longer requires fins. We may have spent $1 million on those fins. Nonetheless, the environment we're moving into has rendered them obsolete, and I'm sacrificing them now so I can become more and more and more and more. There is no change. I'm not changing anything. I'm just letting go of what I was so that I can become something else. I'm not changed. I'm not changed. I'm just becoming more. And so it seems subtle, and believe me, I totally get it. But you are working against your biology like you wouldn't believe by holding the desire and oppressing yourself into changing what you are now. You have to somehow figure out how to just accept yourself wholly, exactly as you are now. And I know you've heard this on rinse and repeat from a million spiritual teachers and self-help people. But hopefully this gives you some perspective on what this actually means. Because to accept yourself wholly, you have to acknowledge the meaning of the truths that you hold to yourself. Your personal truth, the meaning of that truth, holds the key to what you can become and what's ready to be allowed to be made obsolete. And so you may have a truth that emerges in the next moment that renders a lifelong modality of meditation obsolete. Are you going to just let it go like that so you can become more and step into the new truth? Or are you going to hold on to it and refuse to change it because you've been doing it for so long? How could I possibly let go of that? It's a part of who I am. I teach people how to do it now. I'm always giving people advice that they should be doing it. What does that mean about me if I let that go now? Because a new truth has emerged, and that truth has emerged because I've evolved to an extent where I embrace and allow all of my thoughts, and I give each thought my unconditional presence to the extent that they need in order to become a vision that I can then interpret. And my interpretation of that vision means that I'm then evoking my true desires. And so I don't have cycling thoughts anymore, you see. And so how do you reconcile that? You've had it drummed into you that you have to meditate every day. You've been drumming it into yourself. And now all of a sudden you've transcended it because you don't have cycling thoughts. Your thoughts are no longer antagonistic. They're now supporting your evolution. They're now enhancing your capability and your capacity to thrive. How do you reconcile that? And some of you may be listening to this going, you got to be joking. How can you not meditate? And this is a valid and authentic way of being. I'm not saying it should be yours, but it is mine. I don't view thoughts in the way that most people do. I cherish them, and I see every thought as a gift, and I nurture every thought, and I reconcile every new thought that I have, that when a new truth emerges, a revelation that was unseen to me before, if that challenges a truth that I hold now, I reconcile it relentlessly, without fail. I never allow it to remain discordant. And so I don't have circling thoughts. They're not trying to pester me and probe me to get my attention, because that's my nature. And I'm not telling you that's the way you should be. I honestly don't know whether it is the way. the ideal way for you to be. I don't know whether it's just my nature and that's just something that works for me, or whether it's something that can benefit you. I honestly don't know, but I know it works for me, and I just love it. I love it. It's when you really get a grasp of this, you start to realize that when you start realizing that every thought is valid, it's part of this symbiotic relationship between your mind and your body and your spirit or your soul, whatever you want to call it. But the non-physical part of you start to become aware that there are what you think you are and who you think you are is much greater than just the human being looking out of its two eyes. And you begin to understand the nature of these three things as individual components working together symbiotically. And you can start to play to their strengths. You allow the physical body to follow its nature. You allow the non-physical part of you you allow its nature to arise in the form of your feelings and your desires. In the mind, you start to understand its nature. And so then you surrender, you allow it to follow its nature. And, the part of you that is the observer, that literally has the power to appreciate anything and everything. You allow it. You just allow all these parts of you to just follow their nature. And, harmony finds you. And if you do begin to impose, oppress one part of yourself, then you'll know pretty quickly. You'll know straight away, because you'll feel something in your body. You'll feel discord. You'll feel tension. Your environment around you will mirror tension to you. You'll see it in the people around you. You'll notice yourself wanting to, bully someone, or you'll notice your defensiveness, or, it's just a sign that the homeostasis of the greater ecosystem that you are, not just the biology, is, a bit out of kilter. Which one part of yourself is trying to throw its weight round. Could be your desires, trying to force your biology into doing something, into causing it to become antagonistic. Your desire for something in relation to your body could cause it to get its hackles up and see that the part of yourself that wields the desire, that expresses desire, could see that as a threat. And so it pushes back. Same thing. The part of you that just wants to feel good all the time could find that, the timing of receiving a thought, it's interrupting something else that you wanted to be doing. But then you realize that those thoughts are coming from a part of you that sees a much higher perspective, can see the bigger picture, can see the potential for what you really want. And then you begin to trust those thoughts more and more. You know that every time you embrace them and nurture them, they're creating the space for you to become even more than what you are now. Always. Always. So never, ever, ever change yourself. Never. Just drop the desire for change and allow your inspiration to guide you towards a vision that holds a potential for you to just become more, and just become it. Just allow yourself to become more rather than push against the things you're trying to change. Because all you're doing is you're just appreciating those things because of your focus on them. You want to change that so much. Instead, just be that now and allow your inspiration to just unfold and draw you towards the becoming of something entirely new. Okay, that's it for now. For what shall I call this? That's it now for the nature of change, the nature of sacrifice. Still undecided. Okay, talk soon.